Okay, I'm ready to go.
Let's do it.
Hello and welcome to the Serie Chronicles podcast. How is everyone? We're back recording together. I'm obviously Mina Rizuki, and as always, I'm joined by Nicky Bandini. Now, before we start our chat, we want you to head over to serieachronicles.com/Patreon now and subscribe to the Chronicles Tifosi membership with a free 7-day trial. Get priority access to every episode and voice note before the rest of the world. Plus, no ads and bonus Patreon-only exclusive episodes and video episodes. Also, be sure to join the new chat community in the Patreon app and chat with fellow subscribers. Okay, Nicky, it was a very exciting weekend. Perhaps it served as a somewhat, a great weekend required, considering that we can't continue to watch the news of the world and get really depressed with all of it. So turning on and watching Juventus and Milan, did you all of a sudden feel like actually this is like the world's worst game in the world? Like the world's worst game? I mean, the
I think
technique on show, the level of quality of play was just so diabolical. But I guess the tactics were there.
Mina, the Juventus just had this big win. I thought Mina was going to come in sunnier than this. I know she enjoyed Max Allegri gradually derobing on the sideline. I saw she was enjoying that, and
It's the striptease,
but I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, Mina, but I think this is the game Juventus wanted, and they delivered it, and they got their result. And obviously, the red card to Ciao was a huge help in that. To me, certainly there was no controversy in that. It was a clear last man foul. I know Tomori was saying I was there to the ref afterwards, but you look at the footage and he's not. Keane is going to go through on goal, and even that moment really sort of summed up how effective Juventus had been in applying their game plan for this game, right? Because up to that point, it's 11 on 11. And entirely predictably, Juventus, who we should say did start this game without Vlahovic or Chiesa, so probably your first choice attack is missing. And obviously also without Nicola Fagioli, who's received this 7-month suspension for the for the gambling on football matches. So
without Pogba.
Well, I mean, that's some things go without saying, but yes, a diminished lineup perhaps, and we can get into whether we agree with that or not. But in theory, at least, under Allegri, away from home to the team that's top of the table, I could have bet my house that they were going to do what they did, which is low block, keep it tight, say to Milan, have the ball, see if you can make something happen up the wings on us. And Milan, sadly, went straight to their usual game plan in these situations, which is, oh, should we give the ball to Leao and see if he does something? Which is pretty much how that first half went. And Leao nearly did do something in something like the 15th minute, I think it was. He got that one sort of real moment where he came back inside and cut it into Giroud. Giroud made a really nice run, and Szczesny had to make a good save. But that was about it from Milan. And Juventus, really, the situation that leads to Ciao sending off is exactly what Juventus want. Juventus sat there all half and done nothing. And then once in the half, they get that smart break. They get that ball over the top. Keane has beaten his man and would have a chance on goal if Ciao doesn't foul him. So the first half was played in a very predictable way, but in the way Juventus wanted. And then after that, we got a slightly different game because it was 10 on 11 and Juventus did have more of the ball. I think it's always disappointing in those chapters to see how even when they have the ball, Juventus still don't have any particularly great ideas. I mean, the goal comes from Locatelli having a go from 30 yards and getting a deflection. But I don't know. It felt to me like Juventus came with a plan. The plan mostly worked and they got the result they wanted.
One of the criticisms that I've always heard being said about Allegri is that he plays sort of two games, in the sense that it's the first 70 minutes is one way and the last 20 minutes another way. And this is how it feels like he approached this match. It's like we're going to play in a low block, because the one thing that we've seen from Milan, especially, in preseason and all the way forward, is that when they're allowed to play, they are devastating to watch. But if they play in a low block, then they really only have Leao, who can do something because he can take on men. And I think that's the game. It's like, let's just be really tight. Let's force them to come up with something, because they can't. And they have their own absences that matter without Theo Hernandez, obviously. Although Mirante was great in goal, actually. And it was like, no Banacer, no Loftus-Cheek. Quite a few absences for them, honestly speaking. But it's a case of like, let's play this for 70 minutes. Then in the final, we can introduce the likes of Vlahovic. We can introduce the likes of Kaiser. And by then, hopefully, they are tired enough. We have the players, the quality required to get the goal and win it, which is, in all honesty, the strategy that I would have gone for. Gazzetta, as always, were not very kind about the whole thing. And they said, although I understand what they're saying, they're like, really, this is Juventus and you're playing like a newly promoted side. And I'm like, I get it. But this is kind of the way that we judged Milan when they were in the Champions League against Liverpool. Like, this is Milan. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not exactly the Milan of Baresi, right? And this is not exactly the Juventus of like Del Piero. Like, it was really, I looked at the squad and it's, I mean, I hate to say this, but I am a capitalist. Like, when it comes to my football teams, I like watching good teams. I like watching Real Madrid. I like watching, Liverpool. I don't want to watch McKennie in midfield and have like Milik and Keane up front. Although, to be fair, I thought Keane was very good in this match, and I think he's been really showing that he's been improving. Even for Italy, I thought he was great. And he's very good with taking instructions and really showing you what he can do. But all in all, this is not a great side. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it's devoid of any creativity. It doesn't have like the likes of Pogba or Fagioli or even, Dybala of yesteryear. They don't have Lavish. They don't have Kaiser. They don't even have Danilo at the back. So they have Rugani, who they've tried to sell, but there's just really not many people that want Rugani. So I feel like he's just there. And actually, he's become quite good, So I can't believe that you would look at the squad and think, yeah, this is Juve. They should be playing like, Manchester City level football. With who exactly? I mean, this is a team that, quite honestly, hasn't had all their players available to them, have been stuffed with all these problems with Pogba and Fagioli, and they're 2 points off Inter. And I'm just like, at this point, maybe they just have to cover up technically for their technical misgivings with tactical intelligence. And yeah, it's really dull to watch, but with this level of quality on show, I'm surprised they're winning any match, quite honestly, because right now I think Sassuolo, I think Torino, I think maybe not Torino, but I think a lot of teams at the bottom half have better squads.
Let's talk about Juventus. I think there's things to say about Milan, but I do think to draw out some positives from the Juventus performance, because obviously it's not all negatives. I think it's going to be some Juventus fans thinking, "Come on, we did win." I mean, first of all, actually, to one note on both teams, I think it's the first time ever in Serie A that we've had 4 USA players, 4 Americans starting in the same match. And I thought, you mentioned McKennie there, I thought one of the better Tim Weah showings that we've seen at Juventus. He's obviously, there was this moment earlier this season where it seemed like McKennie was maybe going to end up taking the spot that we thought Weah would have at right wing back. But now it seems like McKennie's moved in a spot and Weah's getting some more chances at right wing back again. And I thought, notionally he gets the assist on the goal, but I think it was his ball as well, that his ball to Keane, that caused the red card to begin with as well. I thought some better signs from him, and I don't know, how do you feel he's developing there?
I do agree with that. I think that, obviously, like, this is not the kind of role that he wants to play. But I think that he's very good with instructions again. I think he's somebody who will take that on and is looking to consistently improve. And he'll do whatever is asked of him as long as he feels like it's going to help him improve for the future. And yes, he is dynamic. He can take players on. He is very direct. And I think it causes problems for opposing defenses. There's a lot more that I feel like he's capable of that I've seen before that I haven't yet seen. But I think that this will take a little bit of time because he hasn't really been used in the way that perhaps he should be. But yes, I think there's a lot other positives. Obviously, this was Juve's 6 clean sheets out of 9 in general. I think actually let's have a listen to Patrick Kendrick's. Well,
Yeah.
Patrick Kendrick was doing commentary for this match, and Locatelli scores an important goal. But before we tell you about it, I think it's worth listening to Patrick tell you about it.
It's well told,
Locatelli.
isn't it? Yeah.
It's very well told. So what do you think of his performance in general? Do you think he's sort of becoming the player that he is for the Italian national team?
Oh, that's a that's a high. Why is that a high bar? I don't know. It's an interesting question. Is he actually part of the starting 11 for the Italian national team now? I think curious. Not curious. No, I am curious to see what Spalletti's going to do with that midfield, because obviously against England it was Cristante who started in the middle. But Locatelli has been on this journey, very well articulated by Patrick there. Of course, 7 years ago, we saw him burst onto the scene at Milan, and he was a teenager and he scored this goal in exactly the same day, exactly almost the same minute on the reverse of this fixture. And it hasn't been linear for him since then, of course, because he didn't really ever break through fully to the first team at Milan. He played quite a few games off the bench, but never really got a starting role. Went on to Sassuolo, had some good seasons at Sassuolo, came to Juventus, and I feel like there's been this question with Locatelli really ever since he got to Juventus, which has been running in parallel with the national team, which is when he arrived at Juventus, he did so as someone who'd more proved himself as a mezzala, the box-to-box role, than as a regista. But he'd done a bit of both at Sassuolo. And since getting to Juventus, it's almost always felt since he arrived there like there's just been no one else to be the regista. There's been no one else who can just stand in the middle of the park, put their foot on the ball and try to direct play. And so this has been what he's been asked to do. And I'm still, even now, not totally sure I think it's his best role. I think maybe he is better as a mezzala, but at Juventus, they've got a lot of players who can do that. Maybe none of them as good as you'd like still, but yeah, that's a job that McKennie can do. It's a job that Rabiot can do. It's a job that a bunch of other players can do in that midfield. But who else is going to just run things in the
Hold the
middle?
ball.
And so it's still Locatelli's job. And certainly I think you can look at this performance, and the goal helps, even though it was a bit lucky, but you can look at this performance as a very mature performance from someone who's still only, 25 years old, and someone who took control of the game in an important moment. But I still don't know if I believe in him as a regista. I still don't know if I am totally convinced that he can own that role. And I do believe in players developing and changing through their career. I do think that players, we too often lock them into one role in our heads and think they won't evolve. And maybe this is a big proving season for Locatelli, but the jury's still out for me overall. But this is a very good day for him.
You see, ideally, I'd like Juventus to buy somebody who could do that role, the regista role, and allow him to be a mezzala. Because I think he'd actually score a lot of goals. I think that he is a very talented player who's being forced to play different roles, and it's annoying to watch. I think that he's capable of doing it. I'm happy for him that obviously he managed to get 2 important goals. Obviously, when he was at Milan, he was growing up with them. He was that's where he spent the majority of his younger life, was at Milan, and scoring a goal that against Juventus was a huge thing for him. And then coming as being a Juventus fan and scoring against Milan, the club that raised him, was also a huge moment for him. I mean, he had tears in his eyes. So it's really, this is what I liked all the time, was Locatelli was a Juve fan, Barella was an Inter fan, and obviously Tonali was a Milan fan. It was just nice having them all. But I guess let's talk about Milan for a bit, because I think we've done Juventus.
I want to ask you one thing about
Do you
Locatelli
have any?
quickly, Mina.
Oh,
Like, I just want to know, like,
sure.
because he's not afraid of showing his emotions. Like, he cried when he scored
Mhm.
his first goal for Milan. He cried when he was taken off against Inter when he got injured last year. Giorgio Chiellini told this thing about when he said he was going at the end of last season. He was saying, like, Locatelli was crying for 2 days. I had to tell him to stop, and he cried again now. And I saw some people making fun of him, and I just wondered, like, how you feel about Locatelli being so openly emotional on the football pitch.
Well, this is what makes me think this is one of the worst Juventus sides I've ever seen. It's like,
Because he cries. That's so mean.
No, I don't mean it like that. I just mean that it's a lot of young boys that are still coming to grips with things. It's not a mature side, and I'm used to Juventus being a very mature side.
Mhm.
It was like watching the Beckham documentary, right, and thinking about Manchester United and remembering that they had players like Keane. Um, and I was telling my friend who is a massive Manchester United fan that I wish I had Roy Keanes on my pitch all the time, because it's just the kind of
Mhm.
player that I loved. It was before, when I watched football, it was like Delivio and Antonio Conte and, like Edgar Davids. And it was like they were just these men where they would run through the wall. And I see that at Real Madrid. I don't necessarily see that anymore either, even at Inter, who are the best Italian side that we have right now. I don't trust Çalhanoğlu to be like this Roy Keane or whoever figures, you know what I mean? What I mean by a stalwart of the dressing room.
Mhm.
And I just feel like this is a dressing room where you've got, one guy being done for doping, one guy, being done for betting, one guy who's just crying all the time, and Morata was a guy that was crying all the time. And I was like, and I would like more figures of like a Mandzukic, like Mandzukic perhaps wasn't, the greatest ever striker, but he was
Mhm.
exactly what Juventus needed, and Chiellini was exactly what Juventus needed. And I just feel like this is a young squad, so it's going to take time before they grow into the best versions of themselves. I think Locatelli has a lot going for him, and he's still very young. I mean, actually, the other day they were saying, "Oh, maybe this is Keane's level." I mean, he's 26, and I was like, "No, he's 23." And he's already played for PSG. He's played in the Premier League. He's playing for Juventus. I think there's a lot that he can grow and adapt. Even just these last 6 months, the guy has improved massively in the way that even Allegri keeps talking about it. Just the way his maturity and how much he's advancing his game and learning different things, using his physicality in the right way. Look at Vlahovic. He comes on, and half the time I don't think he knows where his feet are. I think it's going to take time for this. What do you think of Vlahovic? Am I being really harsh on Vlahovic all the time?
I no, I don't know. He's had such a weird start to the season, hasn't he? I think there have been moments this season where that partnership with him and Chiesa has looked brilliant, actually, um, and exciting in a way that we hadn't seen before. But he's never been as technically polished as you want him to be for the price that was paid for him. He's never been as technically tidy a footballer as some others. Um, Maybe it doesn't matter. I mean, he's still got what 6 goals in 9 appearances for Milan for Juventus this season. It's hardly a bad return.
It, I wanted to ask. I wanted to. There was this interview with Paolo Di Canio, and he was
It's
talking
more. It's
about.
better than that, isn't it? Hang on, I'm looking at the wrong numbers because I had some of his international goal scoring mixed up with his Serie A goal scoring. It's 4 and 7 for Juventus this season. Sorry, apologies for that. Just fixing my numbers.
Because he hasn't scored since last January, Locatelli. So it's been a really long time since he scored for Juventus.
I was talking
But
about
you know what?
Vlahovic, not
Sorry.
Locatelli.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why I wanted to. I completely forgot about Vlahovic.
Yes.
This is how much of an image she's leaving. Sorry, I just started thinking about Locatelli. Look, I just, yeah, Vlahovic. But just going back to my previous point about like growing into these mature men, or like the Roy Keanes, like it was an interesting thing when Paolo Di Canio was talking about his time at Juventus, and he said that like he had come home at 10:30 and he was being sort of badly treated by Juventus, who were telling him it's too late. It's just too late to come back at 10:30 at night. And he said that he was always scared that they made him wait outside before they gave him a telling off, because he came home late. And he was saying like it was just this kind of club that was very hardcore in the way that they treated their players. You needed to be the utmost professional. And he was
Mm.
commenting on all of this when it came to Fagioli, and of course, what's been happening now with the betting saga. And I just feel that that's perhaps the difference between what Juventus used to be and what this modern version of Juventus is. And I don't know whether that's just an indication of the modern times right now, because you look across and many clubs are like this. It's not just Juve. Everyone's sort of a little bit softer now. Um, and personally, for someone like me who idolizes Capello and authoritarians, I don't love it.
Mm.
But Milan.
Yes, sorry,
What do you
I
think
ended up
about?
diverting us back onto Juventus for way too long. Sorry to all the Juventus non-enthusiasts who are sick of us talking about Juventus today. It's been quite a long Juventus bit. Um,
It
I think
really
we
has.
haven't done that much Juve this season, so I think it's probably due. Milan, I was disappointed with in this game. Obviously, the red card is the red card, and that situation comes down to an individual player making a mistake. Ciao was made really poor judgments all the way through that situation. He got way too close to Keane, and then the foul was quite blatant. So nothing really to say on that other than that it was the correct decision. What I didn't understand was after Chow goes off, so Pulisic makes way, and Kalulu comes in to replace him in defence. All of that much you understand. You lose the centre back, you've got to do something. What I didn't really understand was the rest of the team's shape after that, because it felt to me like Leao never really moved. So you then had Leao still mostly operating on the left, and no one really compensated for Pulisic not being there on the right. So you just had this very uneven team, at least until the second half substitutions when Jovic and Krunic came in. And even after that, the team just continued to feel quite lopsided. And the problem is I see the dilemma here, because you still want to give yourself a belief that you can score a goal. But I actually wonder if on 10 men, trying to play with 10 men, two of whom are Leao and Giroud, is too much of a luxury, because Leao is not going to sacrifice himself defending so much, and Giroud will work hard, but he's your centre forward. So I felt like that until the 60th minute was not quite right. Then in the 60th minute, some changes are made, but I don't know, that the team never felt like it rebalanced itself to me. It never felt like it found a new shape on 10 men. I appreciate that it's hard on 10 men, but I didn't get what Pioli was doing the rest of the game, really. And if it wasn't for some quite good saves from Morante, it could easily have been more than one goal.
I mean, this is a really tough week for them because obviously they're playing PSG
Mm.
next, and then they have Napoli over the weekend. And now in the two big matches you could say that they've played, they obviously were thrashed by Inter and now lost 1-0, albeit because of that red card, which we have to mention. So it's a bit unlucky for them the way that that match went against Juventus. But considering they had one shot on goal in the first half, there's clearly something not working right now in attack, and they haven't scored the goals right in the Champions League. So for all that they bought going forward, are they still a team that depends on Leao being magical?
Yes. I mean, yes, they should be less, right? You would have thought those first 40 minutes in particular, that was the whole idea, wasn't it? Buying some midfield runners, buying players who can break the lines for you. Of course, Loftus-Cheek is absent, but Pulisic was not his most impactful game in those first 40 minutes. Of course, things might have changed the longer the game went on. I suppose worth saying as well, they were missing Teo Hernandez, so you do get a very different presence on the left side with Florenzi behind Leao instead of Teo. But yeah, it was a bit underwhelming, given how predictable what Juventus did, how predictable their tactics were. I think it was a bit underwhelming, Milan, going forward, and it did feel like that classic, we're just going to rely on the same old, and hope that gives us a result.
It's worth noting that we're recording this on a Tuesday early afternoon. So the Champions League matches are tonight and tomorrow night. So we can't comment on them. But Nikki, do you think that they can win either against PSG or against Napoli?
I think
And they don't
the
have
PSG game.
Chukwueze and stuff.
Yeah, the PSG game it's the away game first, so that shifts the thinking a little bit. But I think these two PSG games are some of the biggest games they're going to play this season, because they're at the do or die point, having drawn the first two games in the group. I think they need a minimum, realistically, of 4 points from these two games against PSG. So I guess you can draw this first one if you think you can win at home. But I do think they need to take points from these games, otherwise they're going to really find themselves in a difficult spot in the group. And in that regard, I think that almost has to feel more critical than the Napoli game. Of course, you don't want to lose two games back to back in Serie A, but league seasons are long and you can make up for situations if you drop points, whereas Champions League group stages are short and you've already dropped points. So to me, the PSG game is the most important in this extremely important 3-game stretch. Obviously, ideally, at the start of these games, you want to win them all. So a quick bounce back is needed for sure.
Especially because they still have to go to obviously to Newcastle and play that game. So they really do need to win, ideally, both of these games. But Napoli, I don't know. I mean, it's worth. Let's move on to Napoli. They managed a 3-1 victory over Hellas Verona, which was important for them because they didn't have Osimhen up front, and they played Cajuste in the middle, who did an exemplary job. I have to say, it really looks like they didn't miss Anguissa. And Raspadori obviously gives a different flavour to the front line, being the star man in attack, than obviously what Osimhen would give. Kvaratskhelia was just Kvaratskhelia, and it was just wonderful to see him on the counter attack. Now, this game, which was important as a win for them, considering everything that they've been going through. Obviously, all the question marks over Rudi Garcia, the gossip surrounding whether Antonio Conte wants the job, whether he was offered the job or not, whether he turned down the job. Rudi Garcia spoke about feeling that he was disrespected. And so I think this was a really important for that match for them to win, especially in this very important week in which they also have a Champions League game to contend before then going to Milan. So, or rather actually hosting Milan. But do you see, I mean, firstly, what did you think of Raspadori being in the middle?
Yeah, it didn't shock me because I think that was often a choice made by Spalletti as well last season when he didn't have Osimhen. There is the other option, of course, Simeone, but I think that we often did see Raspadori play in the middle. I think what you saw to some extent was the familiarity of those times has not been forgotten. So I think it's obviously a slightly different, even if it's the same formation on paper, it's a slightly different formation without Osimhen in it because you no longer have the physical target. But I've said a few times this season that I actually think that one of my complaints about Garcia's Napoli is they go too quickly to what was basically the plan B under Spalletti, which is look for the long ball to Osimhen, look for that, use his height and his target man status, and not having that obliges you to play in a different way, which actually is closer to what Spalletti was most successful with, playing the ball on the floor. It was never supposed to be first plan, hoof it up to Osimhen. And Raspadori is more mobile. He does get out to the wings more. And at least in this game, what you saw is that can be really effective for them because then Kvaratskhelia has more space to come into inside. Then you have just in general, like all the wingers and the midfield runners all find these spaces because he's very good at clearing space. Raspadori, it's one of his sort of, I know it's a strange thing to say because you think your centre forward should be on the ball, but sometimes the most valuable thing that centre forward can do is take defenders with them, and I think he did a really good job of that in this game. Made space for Politano and for Kvaratskhelia, and as you said. I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce it right. I want to say Cajuste, but Cajuste in midfield won a lot of tackles, won a lot of ball in midfield, and had a really nice impact as well. So I thought this was a really encouraging performance from Napoli, albeit not necessarily against the most daunting opposition in the division.
Yeah, I wanted because of the way that Verona play, right? Because they like to do the man on man, because it's about duels and physicality, that it was almost the perfect game to have Raspadori, somebody that was, technically and tactically someone that can create space, that can sort of improve the quality of play in the final third. I mean, he had that great opportunity that he delivered to Cajuste, who missed the chance to score a goal. But it was about him sort of joining the midfield, knowing how to be mobile, covering the right gaps. And it was almost like the perfect guy to have to counteract all the physicality that Verona were trying to bring into this game, all the dueling that they wanted to play in this game. So I thought it seemed fine. But when you in the beginning, Napoli really suffered again with rotating and circulating the ball quickly. Because that's just what Verona were trying to achieve. But then eventually they found their rhythm, and Verona started to fall more and more down and not really put up a fight as much anymore. I mean, we're seeing the best of Kvaratskhelia as well. We're back to seeing him at his best. But do you look at this Napoli side and in any way, shape, or form feel like they will be tough to deal with this season, or do you still look at them as being a side that you think teams can overcome?
I just think what I liked about this performance was actually, one of the things we've talked about with Napoli and their midfield is what one of the strengths that Greece has when he's there is you get a lot of variety. You have players who can pass the ball, players who can dribble the ball, and I think they are a team that certainly has that ability to beat you one on one in a lot of those players. And obviously, Kvaratskhelia is a sensational dribbler, but this felt like a game where they didn't rely on individuality. They relied on just constantly shifting the ball, constantly moving it, constantly working those interchanges, and I don't think we've seen them play a lot like that this season, and I liked it. I thought it was encouraging. Do I think they are suddenly resolved of all the problems they had? No, I still have some questions about whether or not how far you'll go with minestrelli scaldate, reheated soup, which is a bit like what it feels like Garcia is trying to do, is to take spaghetti soup and reheat it. But interestingly, I think this could be a really fascinating chapter with Osimhen out, because you know how much I love Osimhen. He's like my favorite. I love him. I think he's brilliant. But perhaps this is an opportunity for Garcia to make the team more his, to try to not be reliant on one player, because I do feel like when I've watched them this season, too often I just see them going direct to Osimhen and asking him to resolve things. So now you've kind of got to not do that. So I think it's an interesting moment for them. It is a big Champions League game against Union Berlin, just because they did lose the home game to Real Madrid. But unlike Milan, I see their position in this group as being much stronger, because, of course, Braga, the other team, have taken points in this group, and Braga now play back-to-back against Real Madrid. So you would expect and hope that Napoli will be in a strong position by the time they get to game 4, but you have to win the game. So yes, the game against Union Berlin is very important.
Let's see what Real Madrid do to Braga. Inter played Torino, and I'm going to say this. I do feel really sorry for Shaz, but it's because we were talking about Osimhen, and you've already brought this up in your postcards when we were talking, and you said, "Oh, Mina, what do you think of Lautaro Martinez? Is he now one of the best strikers in the world? Do you think
I just
that,
had these flashbacks to when we debated Lukaku and how you were very unhappy about us putting him in that conversation with Benzema, and I thought, I wonder where Mina would stand on Lautaro now. So,
do you think Lukaku? Oh, there was this. Oh God, guys, I'm really sorry, but there was this great clip that Belgium had released, right? And it's showing target practice. And usually, you watch a lot of these because Real Madrid release a lot of them or whatever, and you just watch the best players, and they always obviously score because whatever, it's target practice. I swear to you, Lukaku missed like 7. I mean, it's practice, right?
Poor
So,
big
I mean,
Rom.
I don't know what's involved in it particularly, but to be mentioned alongside Kane and Benzema, no. But Lautaro Martinez, do you feel now?
I think this is the season when he needs to show that he belongs in that conversation. I don't know if he's. The problem is there's a pocket of strikers who I think are certainly still at a higher level. And I think that Kane is in that group. I think that Haaland obviously is in that group. I think that I
You
mean,
think Osimhen is in that group?
where do we put Jude Bellingham in terms of positions? I mean, he's in some sort of group.
He's not that.
And exactly, and same for Mbappe. I still don't really think of him as number 9, even though he sometimes
Yeah.
quite often plays the number 9. I think of them differently.
Yeah.
But when we think about like classic number 9s, then yes, Kane and Haaland, obviously. And I've certainly for a while had Osimhen right on the edge of that group. I think probably need to see just a greater body of evidence in the Champions League before I can sort of fully put them in that group. And I think Martinez is a little bit behind Osimhen in my thinking, but I think he's getting closer to Osimhen. So maybe that's sort of how I frame that. I think he's getting close to Osimhen. I think for me with Lautaro, the question has always been first and foremost consistency, and it's really hard for me to make a judgment on consistency until we get through at least half a season of him doing this, right? Like every season he's been at Inter, he's had these long dry runs. So far this season, he hasn't had that dry run. And if he doesn't have a dry run, then at some point you're going to have to turn around and go, well, hang on, he's just scoring more than a goal a game. And that's not normal. So I think he's been very, very good this season. I think I still have him half a step behind Osimhen, and I have Osimhen half a step behind the really, really top strikers in the world still.
So the top being only Kane and Haaland so far that you've mentioned.
I'm trying to think who
Unless
else would
we're
go in
going
there.
back to like Benzema back in the day.
Right.
Because
I think some of those players have crossed over the peak, like Lewandowski, for instance. Do I still think Lewandowski is there? And I'm not sure. So
I think with Lautaro Martinez, it's because his ceiling is so high, right? Because of what he can do. And you haven't always seen that. It's a little bit like, I look at Leao and I look at Teo. I look at Leao and I look at Lautaro, and I feel like their upside is really high. But it is that. It's the fact that I do think they're streaky. I mean, I have different complaints about both players, right? I don't think Teo is hugely good defensively, and sometimes in the big matches, I think that he's been disappointing. Lautaro, it is the streaks, right? It is like, I'll score like now 11 goals in 9 games, but there will be moments where I'm not there and I don't show you that. But I think that he creates a great partnership right now with Thuram. I think Thuram is sensational. And together they've now gotten 16 and 11. And I think that partnership really helps him. I think he can do things that perhaps Osimhen can't, and vice versa, right? They're very different players. Consistency is really the only thing I think that makes me want to see more from Lautaro Martinez. The way that he is going this season, if he could keep it up till the end, then yeah, I have to see that. But it's also kind of what you need to do for your country too, and just in different competitions. I like specifically strikers that help the team a lot. I sort of like a Raspadori if Raspadori was on Benzema's level. That kind of level of play I enjoy a lot. That kind of striker I enjoy a lot. And I think Kane is that kind of striker. And I think Benzema is that kind of striker. So I enjoy that a lot more than I would enjoy, say, Haaland, who was a phenomenal goal scorer, but perhaps not somebody who will necessarily partake in the final third, because then they don't need him to either, right? But Inter, dispatched Torino with relative ease. I do think Scher's injury at the back and him being taken off really spoiled what Torino was trying to do, at least defensively. But this is now Inter's 4th victory in their first 4 away games without conceding a goal. And the last time this happened was in 2013. And before that in 1967. Both times they didn't win the championship. Do you think that means something?
I just like that you clarified what Torino were trying to do defensively, as if Torino were trying to do anything that wasn't defensively, because I think that was all Torino were trying to do. And once the ball went in, that was the end of the game.
They had chances.
I'm being unfair.
They weren't so bad in the first half. But this is another problem. I mean, they can't score a goal. They really can't score a goal. And I know that the Zapata wasn't available for them right now. But speaking of Torino, this is the 4th game in which they haven't scored a goal. And this is starting to become a real problem, because are they this really bad team? And they changed this because they decided to not play a 3-man back line. Usually they play like a 3-4-2-1. And this time around they went with a 4 at the back. But I don't know whether this side just lacks a lot of quality or they just can't score a goal.
They're definitely missing something up front. I mean, I think Radonjic is the only one who's scored more than 1 goal for them this season. And that's not your centre forward. It's definitely a concern for them. It's never been under Juric a team that is free flowing and scoring lots of goals, but it's I don't know. I don't have. Sorry, something very odd is happening on our call. I keep seeing balloons go up Simon's screen, and I don't know how that happened. It's very distracting.
Yeah, I haven't
seen it either. Simon. Anyway, can't remember what I was saying.
Back to football.
Can't remember what I was saying.
Torino, you were just saying we're missing something.
They definitely, Torino definitely have problems up front. Look, this is not a game they expected to get points from particularly. Obviously, at home, maybe you hope you can do something. They do have, despite not being the biggest stadium, it can be quite a hostile atmosphere there when things are right for away teams. But Inter are the best team in Italy right now, and Torino are some way from the best that we've seen under Juric, I would say. So some concerns for them, definitely some concerns for them in the goal scoring department. And you can look and say, well, yes, Zapata not being there makes a difference, and will things get better as he settles more? But that's been one of Zapata's problems the last few seasons, is staying fit. So that isn't necessarily a situation you're going to get a solution to.
Yeah, I also do want to point out that I thought their tactics were good in this match. Like, I really did think that they tried really hard to sort of stop everything on the wide areas, double down and make sure that they don't make a difference. Actually, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, I will move on from this game, but I do want to ask you this question because one of my friends said that Pioli would be the reason if Milan win this season, the title. But Inzaghi could, and I really disagreed with this. So this is not my point of view. I just want to make that clear. Yeah. But they said if Inter don't win it, it's because of Inzaghi. But if Milan do win it, it's because of Pioli. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. So I asked him to sort of go further. And he said he felt like a lot of the time with Inzaghi, if his plan is not working, then what he does is substitute men. He doesn't substitute sort of tactical ideas, right? Like, he just changes the men around. He doesn't try to do something differently that might actually open opportunities for his team or change the way that the team approach the game. And then I looked at this match and I was like, okay, on this occasion, he brought in Dumfries and Fratesi, which and Augusto, but again, it's kind of changing the fullbacks, right? Is that what he does? And is that one of the reasons why, like, sometimes when they don't win against certain teams, whether it would be a Bologna or Sassuolo, it's that he doesn't make the right tactical substitutions to change the game around?
I think that's a valid question. I do think that Inzaghi is substitutions have been a thing that we've come back to repeatedly through his time at Inter as being, I don't know, something that we question and wonder if he makes the right ones. I mean, the good news is he can't bring Correa on anymore, so he's not going to just go back to his crutch that let us down before. The other thing that crossed my mind actually as you were reading that, Mina, because I'm just going to throw it in because you might not get to it otherwise. You said it could be Inzaghi that cost into the title. Do we mean Pippo Inzaghi, who's now in charge of Salernitana, took over during the international break and got a 2-2 draw in his first game in charge? So maybe that's the story waiting to be happen, that Pippo at some point will take points off Simone and that will swing the title race.
Oh, their poor parents. Who are they going to go for on this? Are you going to cheer on
They're very
Salernitana?
close, the Inzaghi family. So probably that would be a big family, I don't know, support system. But yes.
That would be an interesting one. Meanwhile, I want to mention Lazio, just because I think that we're starting to see sort of the beginnings of the real Lazio coming back, because they were awful at the start of the season. And I think Maurizio Sarri was very clear in noting that he's one of those coaches that takes time to really spread the message of what he wants and his tactical ideals to the team. And it didn't help, obviously, that a lot of the players that he wanted, or also just the players that were brought in, came too late in the transfer market, so that he didn't really have time to create the unit that he has since been creating. And their performances have somewhat improved. Obviously, a good 2-0 victory over Sassuolo. But it was very quick. I mean, it was by the 23rd minute, they were 2-0 up. And you just saw a side that really dominated, and a side in which the midfield made a difference. And are we now, I mean, a lot of the times when I talk about Lazio, people are like, no, they just overachieved last season. They totally overachieved last season. They're just definitely not a threat. But, I mean, this is without Milinkovic-Savic, and Sassuolo defeated Juventus and they defeated Inter. So it's not like a team that you just throw away. Do Lazio, I mean, it's a small squad and they're playing in the Champions League, but are they coming back? Are they now a threat to consider?
I think what's most encouraging about this win, in particular, is when you look at the personnel. You already mentioned, by the way, Sassuolo. They've had a mixed start to the season, but they did have a couple of big scalps already, so this was definitely no pushover. And I think it's interesting when you look at the personnel used in this game, because Castellano starts up front ahead of Immobile, or instead of Immobile, right ahead of. You didn't have Zaccagni starting on the left-hand side either. So there was some evidence here, and Kamada didn't start either, who's been someone who was signed in the summer and they were hoping to get something out of. Some evidence here of the depth that is now there in the squad, which was part of what they hoped to achieve. Yes, Milinkovic-Savic left, but they did sign a number of players. Perhaps some evidence in the Castellanos case in particular, of a player pushing through now who is going to pose some interesting questions about who is the first choice up front if he keeps playing like this, because this was his second consecutive start. In those 2 starts, he's had 2 assists and a goal. Castellanos, he got an assist in this game. He's only started 3 games in total, and in all of them, he's looked pretty good. He started the defeat to Milan, but he played well individually in that game. I think there's some really good stuff in there for Lazio. I think that's all encouraging. And unlike some of the other teams we mentioned, they actually made a nice start in the Champions League as well, which helps them now to focus on the league a bit more. But I still have some real reservations about the quality in midfield. I still don't know that I see the connecting idea that replaces Milinkovic-Savic yet. And that's a question for me. It feels like instead of Milinkovic-Savic, you're just asking Luis Alberto to be great, which we know he can be. But I've never quite been sold on Luis Alberto as the consistent connector of a team in the way that Milinkovic-Savic was. And that's still going to be a question. He was very good in this game again.
Sure, but you're seeing like Guendouzi doing better and really taking to the squad and providing the dynamism, providing sort of the grinta, if you like. But what about Roma Monza? Now, this was a very dramatic
There's definitely
match.
some interesting. Just to say quickly, Mina, the midfield has got the potential to go a long way because it's still young, right? Guendouzi, I feel like he's been around forever because he was at Arsenal so long. He's 24 years old, and Nicola Rovella, obviously in the middle of the park, is 21. So there is some real potential in the midfield to grow together.
Perhaps more potential right now than what Roma have. So they managed to achieve a 1-0 against Monza. This was a very melodramatic match. We don't have time to go through the ins and outs of it, but I think the most important one is Al-Shaarawy got a goal. He was also in tears. What is going on with our football? But obviously with him, he has seen his name mentioned. He has been very upset when it comes to his name being mentioned in the news. And trying to link that to a betting scandal in which he firmly denies any involvement and is looking to take legal action. So scoring the goal was like getting that monkey off his back. And then obviously Mourinho got sent off, was taunting Palladino and Monza. And now Mourinho won't be available on the sideline in Roma's match against Inter.
Which is tremendously convenient, isn't it? Because it means he doesn't have to go back to Inter, which I've always wondered how he feels like deep down about those. Obviously, when he came to Roma, when he first went back there, he did receive a hero's welcome to some extent, and he got some chance from the second time as well. And Roma have been back to San Siro to play Inter 3 times, I think, since Mourinho took charge. They lost both times he was there. And then the most recent one, he was suspended, and Salvatore Forti, the reserve, the second in command, took them there and they won. So is this part of the Mourinho scheme that he's decided it's better off if he doesn't go back to Inter? He has to get himself suspended, because it was right at the end as well. It was right at the end. You think, is he just trying to like not go back? But I mean, this was a bit of a slog, wasn't it? Roma had an extra man from the 41st minute. Al-Shaarawy's goal comes in the 90th. It was harder work than it felt like it needed to be against Monza. And jury's still very much out on whether or not the Lukaku-Belotti strike partnership works. Although, look, Roma did hit the woodwork a couple of times on the way to scoring that goal. I think it would have been a bit of a smash and grab if Monza had held on to get the draw. But yes, I do think it's very convenient for Jose that he doesn't have to go back to Inter and deal with all of his conflicted emotions with that fan base.
I think it's also particularly hard to play without Pellegrini and Dybala's sort of ingenuity in that team. So they have to make the most of what they can. In other news, Salernitana under Pippo Inzaghi managed a 2-2 against Cagliari. As we'd already mentioned, Bologna defeated Frosinone 2-1. Frosinone with a goal again from Sule. Obviously, Juventus under 23 next-gen player. Atalanta 2-0 victory over newly promoted Genoa. And I think other than that, we've discussed the rest of the games. Looking ahead to the Champions League, Union Berlin will host Napoli. They have lost their last 8 matches in a row. So we're hoping that Napoli get 3 points in this match. In to host RB Salzburg, who really have put Benfica in a tight spot. So another interesting match to watch. Feyenoord host Lazio. These two teams have met in the Europa League. Both sides won their home matches. I'm putting all my money on Lazio for this match. Probably shouldn't be talking about putting my money in betting considering what's going on. Meanwhile, PSG host Milan, and this is very much the game of the round. So we've talked about this a lot. So I'm dying to see whether Luis Enrique plays 4-2-4. I really hope to God he does, so that Milan can win 5-0.
It's really tough because when you look at performances in the group stage so far, I feel like Lazio were not great in either of their games, but they have 4 points, and so they're in a strong position. I think Milan were the better team in both games they played, but they've only got 2 points, and now they're up against it. They need to get results. Like, you can't keep drawing; you will not make it through the group. So, yeah, really huge trip to Paris for Milan.
It really is. And of course, there's also Roma and Atalanta in the Europa League and Fiorentina in the Conference League. Roma are playing Slavia Prague. My producer would like me to tell you this is memories of a classic 1995-96 UEFA Cup quarterfinal, lost on away goals in extra time. The fact that you remember this, Simon. But we will be back during the week to give you voice notes after the games in Europe. But before we go, should we do a quick shout outs to new Chronicles Tifosi members?
Definitely.
Okay, it's only 4, so we'll split the list as usual. Hello and welcome to Paddy Duffy and to Matthew Sweeney.
And welcome as well to Esme, just Esme, and Nick, just Nick. Thank you all so much for supporting us, for being members of our community, and to all of our patrons for recent feedback as well, as we continue to try to make this show more what you want from it. You can find us on Twitter at Nicky Bandini, at Mina Rizuki, and you can subscribe to Serie Chronicles on YouTube for clips and short videos of the show. And yeah, we'll see you later this week. All right, gang. Bye.
Serie Chronicles is a Chronicles production.